Welcome to the teacher-led demo on abstract watercolor painting, where you will learn all the techniques needed to create this project. To get started, you'll need watercolor paper. We recommend 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. Our final project will be 10 inches by 10 inches, but I buy sheets of 11 by 14 inches, which means I will have to cut off some excess. So instead of wasting the excess watercolor paper, let's use it to create a bookmark. Take the excess watercolor paper and cut it down into 8-inch by 2-inch pieces. I will be using Prang student grade watercolor paint pens for this teacher-led demo. To get started, I would like you to choose 3 colors that you feel go together well. Choose colors that interact with each other or blend together to create an interesting transition of value or color blends. Choosing to work with a limited color palette creates unity and harmony throughout the piece. You will activate the watercolor by adding water to the paint pans. You can also use the lid of the watercolor set to mix your colors to get the colors that you desire for this project. Please note that the more water that's involved with the mixtures, the lighter the value. The less water you add to the mixtures, the darker the value. Painting with watercolor is a fast-moving medium, so you need to make sure that your colors are ready to go. Now that our paint is ready, we're going to start by creating a wash of water on our piece of watercolor paper. Spread water throughout the page so that it starts at the top and flows to the bottom. I recommend creating an organic edge, and don't let the watercolor touch the edge of the paper for an interesting white border. Next, you're going to take watercolor, whichever color you'd like to start with, and you're going to drop it right into the water. You'll notice that the watercolor immediately starts to spread across the water. It might even go down towards the bottom of the page, and that's totally okay. When you have a good amount of the first color, go ahead and drop in your second color right in the center, allowing both colors to blend together. When you are ready, you can go ahead and pick up your third color, start at the bottom and bring it up towards the middle area so that your third color blends in with your second color. You'll notice also that as I'm adding color to the water mixture, I am painting in circles to kind of make sure the paint spreads throughout and fills up the space. Okay, so this part's fun. Pick up your page and move it side to side just by tilting the paper. This allows the watercolor to kind of flow and blend naturally. And what's exciting is you're not always sure how it's going to turn out. You just have to trust the process. I would like my bookmark to have a little bit more color, so I'm going to go ahead and drop in some more watercolor. This is called the wet on wet technique. Once again, I'm going to pick up my watercolor paper, I'm going to tilt it and allow the watercolor to kind of flow and blend. But one thing I noticed on mine is that I added too much water, so I'm going to let my dry paintbrush soak up the excess watercolor, which I will dab off on my napkin. To create a little bit more interest, I'm going to try the splattering effect. Simply soak up some watercolor on your paintbrush and flick your paintbrush around the page, creating a speckled effect. When you're happy with the background, you can let it dry naturally, or you can blow dry it. When your work is completely dry, it's time to draw out the composition with a pencil. Feel free to use shape templates like lids or cups to create neat circles, or you could just freehand organic shapes. As you draw, make sure to draw lightly with pencil. The project requirement is to draw at least 5 organic shapes and 3 natural elements throughout the composition. Natural elements could be leaves or flowers or cloud shapes, and organic shapes are any type of shape that has a curve or are freeform. Again, remember to draw lightly. Please note that you can erase your pencil lines if you need to, but I would suggest avoiding it because if you erase too much, you could erase the watercolor. When you have filled up the space and created a strong composition of organic shapes and natural elements, you're ready to begin painting your shapes with more watercolor. We call this layering. We also call it wet on dry technique. We're also using the hard edge technique. We want the edges to be nice and neat and clean. We're not going for a soft blurred edge, which is what you would get if you were working wet on wet. I do also highly recommend that you always try to show color blends or transitions of value whenever possible. So here I'm using a little bit of red, and then I added a lighter orange-brown color so that it looks like it's fading from dark to light. Another option is to create gradations with one color and add a little bit of water to the edge so the color appears to get lighter as it moves away. Slowly work around the composition, coloring in every single shape that you drew, making sure to show color blends and gradations of value, and working your way around the composition so that each shape has a chance to dry before you do another shape that's next to it. If you do 2 shapes that are touching and they're both still wet, what will happen is they'll bleed into each other. So if that's not an effect you're going for, make sure that you allow one shape to dry before you do the shape next to it. As a final effect with watercolor, go ahead and try splattering one last time, which will create a really nice, finished, unified look. For this next step, you want to make sure that your watercolor is fully dry. You can either let it dry naturally, or you could use a blow dryer to speed up the process. This next step is to use a fine liner to trace over all of your shapes and watercolor edges. There's so many different fine liners you could use, from Sharpie to microns. Anything that has a nice fine tip will do the job. Neatly trace all of the shapes, making sure to cover up all of your pencil lines as you go. You'll trace the organic shapes that you drew, the natural elements like leaves and flowers, and you'll also trace the circles. When you're done tracing the natural and organic elements, what you'll do is trace the watercolor line edge. You should also trace the paint splatters that you created. To add even more interest, you might want to trace the edges where one color meets another color. I'm going to use a different pen, a smaller pen, which will create a thinner line to do this throughout the page. Any variation I see in color, I'm going to trace the edge of. This does take a little bit of time to do, but the more lines you have, the more interesting your piece will be. Okay, the last and final detail we'll add to our watercolor painting is colored pencil layering. I chose a few colors that I thought might complement the painting. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the colored pencils to create value transitions of dark to light. You can also use colored pencils to cover over any imperfections or mistakes that you might see on your painting. You don't want to overdo it with the colored pencil. The colored pencil is meant to enhance the work and to add a little bit more value and smooth transitions of color blends, but it's not meant to overpower the watercolor. As you color, try to work in small, tight circles throughout each shape, creating a smooth effect. You don't want to see line direction, and you don't want your work to be too transparent. I suggest using colored pencil only in the shapes, not in the background, but you are welcome to use it in the background if you think that will enhance your painting. I'm going to use some lighter colors like yellow and light green to add some highlights. and some lighter values throughout the shapes. Okay, I think I'm done. I'm going to take a look at it and make sure I have an even flow of pen lines and a nice smooth transition of value throughout the composition. Now, if you're going to turn this demo into a bookmark, you might want to think about first laminating the paper. Otherwise, go ahead and take a hole puncher and you're going to punch a hole on the top of your paper right in the center. Next, choose a ribbon color that complements your painting. Cut off a piece of ribbon to your desired length. Fold the ribbon in half and push the folded section through the hole. Then tuck and pull the ends through that hole like so. Pull it nice and tight, and you have now created your own functional art piece. You have a bookmark that you could use as you read. You have now practiced and learned a variety of techniques that will allow you to complete the final project, the Organic Connections project. Well done.